What is up? Welcome to the first ever edition to 107.5 The Game's Game TV crossover. I'm Elijah Campbell. You see me every day, Monday to Friday from 6 to 9 a.m. on the early game. But today, we're introducing something special, a special extra for our YouTube page and our Game TV subscribers, where we're going to phone a friend. But instead of phoning a friend, we just have them come into Studio 803 and hang out with me, which seems a little more fun. Or at least I'd like to think it's a little more fun. So what we'll be doing with the Game TV crossover, we'll be getting our friends from the television side of things, bringing them into our fancy video podcasting studio at Studio 803, and talking about the latest, not just from local Gamecock athletics, but also get their takes on some national happenings in sport as well. And what better week to do this than with the Super Bowl, the big game, if you will, happening on Sunday. And to join me for this first ever rendition of the Game TV crossover, our friends from just right down the road over at WIS, Nick Harvey, Julia Westerman, coming into the studio to hang out with me today. Guys, thank you for coming in, taking some time. I know it's been a really busy last week for you guys, considering what the weather was like. I think Nick Harvey's already told me some horror stories about what you guys had to do over the course of the past week. But now we get to invite you in here to talk some sports with us.
Back where we belong.
I agree. Yeah, I would much rather be doing this than talking about snow.
Not because we don't deal with that a lot around here.
I was not prepared.
Two weekends in a row.
It's one thing to get it one week. It's another thing to have it the exact next weekend too.
It's one of those things where it wasn't that bad the first time. And I think we maybe overreacted a little bit, and then the snow came and it actually made everybody freak out a little bit. Just a little bit.
Right.
But now we're here.
Now
we're excited.
We're talking sports.
Yeah. It feels like one of those awesome Disney Channel crossover episodes from our youth.
Those used to be really good. If you're watching this at a certain age, you remember exactly the ones that you thoroughly enjoyed.
And then they would always weave everybody's name into the title of the episode. Oh, memories.
See, we tried to come up with something like that too, but we ended up on Game TV crossover. It's the closest thing we can get to it. So
I love it.
We workshop everything around here. But for the first segment here, I wanted to get y'all's take on a few of the local things, right? There's a lot happening in the month of January and going into February. You have now in college football essentially a free agency part of the offseason. And here locally, you had to get a new offensive coordinator, a new running backs coach, a new offensive line coach, and then you had to get a new defensive edge or defensive end and edge rusher coach because Sterling Lucas decided to go to LSU. So there's a lot of change, not just with the roster, but with the coaching staff too, which just kind of leads me to this. With all of these changes that the coaching staff has gone and having to overhaul your offensive line through the transfer portal, but still retaining Lenora Sellers, Nick Harbor, Dylan Stewart, should Gamecock fans feel more optimistic going into this year than they did going into 2025?
I have a bad answer for this, but my answer is I don't know. I mean, I feel like it's February. We've seen kind of how they've retooled this, offense, defense, everything. You've seen the pieces that they brought in to the coaching staff. You've seen what they've done in the past at their other programs. But we've seen other programs around the nation where you bring somebody who's supposed to be really successful, take Garrett Riley at Clemson. You expected him to have a really good tenure, and then that didn't work out. So my answer is I don't know, because you truly can't see what they're going to do here until they are here, and they're in Williams-Brice Stadium, and they're working with what they brought in. It's a bad answer. I'm so sorry, but I don't know. It's tough.
I think, for me, what sticks out is the fact that they've gotten so much experience. I know Shane mentioned it in a press conference this past week, the experience that they went after in the portal, because you look at a team like Indiana, who just won the national championship. They weren't landing, the top prospects in the nation, but they were landing guys with experience, guys that have been in, college football 3 years, coming up on their senior year stuff, the guys who have been there and done it. And I think that sticks out to me, because you're going to have maybe a bigger leadership room type of locker room than you maybe had last year. But at the same time, and I think we've talked about this a couple times off air, just in general conversation, but I like what Randy Clements did with the offensive line in the portal. I like what they've built, and they've got a lot of depth. But it's one of those things where, I really liked the offensive line room that they brought back last year. They had a lot of guys who were thrown into the fire and were expected to do really good things, and then fell apart week 1, week 2. So I'm on the prove it basis right now, where I have to see it before I can fully buy into what they've done.
Which is certainly fair. And I think when we look at college football in 2026, as things are kind of currently constructed, teams take one of two different approaches in the transfer portal. You're going after either production or potential. Because a lot of the transfers that leave programs like Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, a lot of these higher-end programs, players are transferring because they can't get on the field, but they have a lot of high-end potential. One thing I think Indiana proved is that you can go after players who, albeit playing at lower, I guess, tiered programs. If they're very productive, you can be able to get that to translate at a higher level because of the aforementioned experience. So the question I have for you guys is, what do you think, if for a program like South Carolina and where they're at kind of in the SEC pecking order, is it more of a wiser thing to me to go after some of that potential or the bucket of production at previous stops?
Well, and you make that point with Indiana. I was thinking that already is, they've filled their roster with guys that, hey, they can do things. We just don't know exactly what they'll do. And then that panned out for them very, very well.
Pretty well.
And I think that they proved that to any program, it's possible. You just have to be smart about it. You can't just pick up anybody from the wild and expect them to do great things. You have to find people that have, the makings of someone who's going to be successful. But I think there's an opportunity to not just have all these teams go after one guy because he's the hottest name in the transfer portal. I think there's more opportunities now where maybe kind of underlying names, people who don't get a lot of attention, can get brought into a program like South Carolina where they see promise and potential in him. And then if it pans out, it pans out. But it is more of a gamble than maybe you would have had in the past, where you're just buying in on these names that should be good, will be good, end up being good. Now it's okay, hey, let's give somebody a shot and see what they can do.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. But, and you can see it in the SEC. Look at Vanderbilt, for instance. Like, they didn't make it to the national championship. They didn't make it into the playoff. But another team that went after experience in the transfer portal and had a very old team in a good way. Like, it benefited them to have so many guys who have been around the bend and been a part of college football that know what they're doing, or at least know how the process works, to get the younger guys more prepared and ready to go. And I think that went a long way. Even like Dylan Stewart's freshman year, having Kyle Kennard opposite of him. Obviously, Kyle Kennard was generational talent, but you've got a guy who's been there and done it and is about to go to the league, just sharing wisdom with you and basically giving you an opportunity to benefit off of his success. Because they were the most dominant defensive end pairing in the SEC, I think. And it's just, you look at things like that where when somebody's got that leadership or that mentor in the locker room, like it's changing the landscape, I think, of how teams are trying to build rosters now. It is high school recruiting still. Shane said that the other day, but it's high school recruiting with also gathering experience to get those guys more prepared, and it's not everybody learning on the fly.
Well, I do think we're going to see a lot older rosters, which is that a good thing or a bad thing? Because you weigh, the college game is supposed to be the next step for all these high school athletes, and I think that they're getting kind of a big hit that they didn't anticipate when they, grew up and wanted to follow this dream. So on one hand, it's like, okay, these guys are getting their opportunity at maybe 23 years old, but then how does this affect the 18-year-old? And I think that it's going to be a long time before we find this balance between the two, of the young kids still getting the opportunity they signed up for, but then the experience and the leadership coming to these teams and really bolstering those rosters.
There's certainly a trickle-down effect of where top-end high school talent ends up dispersing and whether or not that ends up getting more spread out nationally to maybe start somewhere, because now I think more than ever we realize where you start your college career is never really where you're going to end it. And with rare occasion now, and those are the players that end up becoming legends at their schools now, it just looks a whole lot different now than it ever used to. But on the basketball side, things that are currently happening, we preview football all day, but there are things happening in basketball right now locally, starting with the men's basketball team here at South Carolina. We're very well into conference play. We're over halfway through the conference slate. And the South Carolina men's team now under 500 for the first time this year overall. They're 2-8 in SEC play, and we've seen a lot of variance in how this team has lost games. You saw a 47-point loss to Florida at home just this past week. You saw maybe play one of their better games at Texas, but still end up resulting in a loss. And a couple of the problems they had in that game kind of showing up in that one to really make it the difference between winning and losing. So my question for you two is, How big of a gap is it right now? Clearly, there's a gap when you're 2-8, and it's the second straight year where you're finding yourself at the bottom of the SEC. But how big of a gap, from a program perspective, is South Carolina than the rest of their peers in this league?
I mean, it's tough because we've seen spurts where they've looked like they can hang with anybody in the conference this year, but like you can't be a team who just lives off of spurts. You can't have these little energy, like, I don't know how to explain it, but they look really good at points at certain portions of a game, but they can't finish, and they're still making weights. They don't run that offense well enough. Like a lot of times it's just trusting the 3-ball too much, right? Like they're really just trying to get beyond the arc and shoot as often as possible, and that only gets you so far when you're not a super successful 3-point shooting.
When you're under
team
30% in terms of making
right,
it,
Yeah.
yes.
Right, and I don't know. I do think that gap is a lot bigger than I want to think it is, because again, you've seen them hold tight and play close games, but they're not nearly of the pedigree of most any other team in the conference.
Yeah, and I mean, just to talk about the gap, I mean, I think it's massive, because you think year in and year out, there's almost an expectation for where South Carolina is going to be predicted to finish, and it's usually in the back half of the conference. And to the point about 3-point shooting, I mean, that's something that I was worried about as soon as they were talking about it in the preseason. It's like, okay, we're going to live and die by the 3, which for certain teams is a great idea. You look at a team like Alabama, and they put up 1 million 3-point shots a game, but they're always, it seems like, generating good looks. And if they don't go in, at least, they're getting in space where it makes sense. With South Carolina, I feel like a lot of the times that's just the choice. And it's like, okay, we're going down the court, shoot the 3. And it's not always the best opportunity. And I just wonder where that decision making is. And that worries me, because, you drop below 500. What do you change at this point in the season? What do you shift? Is there anything that you can do? And to the point where we were talking about, transfer portal talent, I just wonder, did Lamont just try to bring in a lot of guys that he thought were good rather than bringing in a lot of guys that he thought could play well together?
And that's the hardest part about this, is when you do bring in essentially strangers to have to gel and play together in a sport that is so chemistry-based like basketball, there is a pathway or plausibility of this type of variance happening. I think for me, the biggest thing when watching them play is I don't mind the style of play. I question if you got the right horses to be able to run the race, right? And I think when you look at just a basketball talent and athleticism and size perspective, you're playing teams like Alabama that they do have a very analytically sound way of playing basketball, where they play really fast, they shoot a lot of threes, but they have a lot of size, they have a lot of athleticism. And when you see them play like a game against Arkansas, the athleticism discrepancy jumps off the page. And when you see them play against a team like Florida, the size discrepancy jumps off the screen at you when you watch it. And when you look at just how they play against other SEC teams that have better athleticism, better size, I don't think this team does enough of the other things and little things well enough to be able to make up for what those deficiencies are.
The bottom line is no matter how tough of a season you're having in the SEC, you should not lose to a peer school by 47.
100%.
That's it.
On the surface should never happen, even if you are at a deficiency when it comes to certain parts of your roster. On the women's side, though, we are fresh off of a 40-plus point beatdown.
Just
at
after I say
CLA.
that, you shouldn't lose to any
Yeah.
of your institutions. It's a little different here.
It's a little different here because Dawn's been doing this to everybody in the conference for the last several years now. And what they've built is truly one of the crown jewel programs, not just in women's college basketball, but in all of college sports right now, in terms of you can bank on 27, 28 wins in the regular season. Right now, this team's been a little different than I feel like it has been the last few years, because they've been bit with the injury bug a lot harder. You lose Chloe Kitts at the very beginning of the season. You've played stretches without Tanaya Latson, who you got in from the transfer portal, who was the nation's leading scorer last year. You've played stretches without Agat McKeer, who is one of the freshmen that's been asked to play a larger role than most freshmen would on a Dawn Staley coach team. You've dealt with so many different injuries. Tessa Johnson dealing with one right now. But despite all these injuries and getting a variance in performances, like there's a big difference in what we saw at Texas A&M earlier the week and what we saw last night at Colonial Life Arena by beating Mississippi State by 40 points, who was, a week removed from giving Tennessee their only conference loss this year. What I wanted to pose to you guys is, Does this type of injury adversity and what we've seen from the supporting cast make you feel good enough to consider them a legit contender with UConn, who is seemingly taking a buzzsaw to everybody that they play this year? And they put one to you in the national title game last year. Do we feel good about the supporting cast outside of your normal stars like Joyce, Tessa, Raven Johnson, to feel good about being able to compete in being one of those final two teams?
Well, let me start with, I don't know if I necessarily want to say that I am 100% certain about the UConn comparison at this point. I think it's really tough when you compare what UConn does in the Big East to what South Carolina does in the SEC. And of course, I mean, UConn did just play Tennessee and laid a hammer on them, but it's very difficult to weigh that. I mean, UConn is obviously the outright favorite to repeat. That's a whole thing. With South Carolina, though, I mean, especially with last night, I was really impressed with Isla McDowell. I think she's been trending in the right way, the right direction for quite a long time. And then you saw that kind of come to a head, and she was so humble about it in post-game, being like, I don't think about it. I try not to, just visualize what the game's going to look like. But it's like, how good are you at actually being able to do that? But it seems like she felt really good going into the game. It seems like she was fueled by the fact that she was getting her first career start. She had to step up for her team. 16 points, 4 of 8 from 3, I believe.
Yeah.
Impressive. And it seems like she's taking those steps. And she's not the only one. Maddie McDaniel had a great night last night as well, where they're both trying to fill in those guard roles and really step up for the people that they're missing. So I like what I'm seeing in terms of, the supporting cast and how they fill in. And I think this team has gotten really good at filling in when they need to, because they've been in that situation way too many times this season. They're struggling with those injuries, but I think it's getting them that necessary battle testing that, once they get to the tournament, anybody can step up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just to piggyback off of that, I think I completely agree with the whole injury situation. Like, you have a team who you bring in so much talent year in and year out, and you're dealing with something that really, I mean, besides what last season, I think Ashlyn Watkins was like the big injury last season, and then really not much else. You had a pretty healthy roster full of a lot of experience and talent. You got a younger team this year, but you've also dealt with not having some of your top players throughout multiple spurts this season. And like, the same thing goes for the Texas A&M game. They had a short bench when they went to College Station, and they took care of business. It might not have been the prettiest game. I think Dawn said it was a pretty sloppy outing, but they still took care of business. They still beat an SEC team on the road. Like, that's this team. And again, I don't want to draw comparisons to UConn, because it's just a different sample size at this point for the most part. But the Gamecocks do take Tennessee this weekend, so that'll be interesting to see how that game goes, because then you can maybe draw a little more of, all right, well, this is what South Carolina did against them, this is what UConn did versus, and then you can start making those comparisons. But I do think this women's basketball team is capable. I think the Gamecocks can get there again, but it's probably going to be another heavyweight showdown in the national championship if they get that far.
Something I would certainly like to see, because I love a good budding rivalry when it comes to playing on the biggest stage.
I'd also like to be in Phoenix in April, so.
I've heard it's nice there at that time of year.
It'll be warmer.
Yeah, it'd be a lot warmer than what it's been here the last couple of weeks. We certainly don't have to worry about any snow. You probably won't even have to worry about rain. But coming up next, the Super Bowl is being played in Santa Clara. We have the final football game of the season. We will get Nick and Julia's takes on the big game coming up next to round out the first ever episode of the Game Crossover. Welcome back to the Game TV crossover. I'm Elijah Campbell alongside my pals from WIS, Nick Harvey, Julia Westerman. We just got done breaking down the local stuff. Now we get to the national stories. And, well, it's the first week in February, meaning we're going to be talking about the big game that is happening in Santa Clara, California, between the Seattle Seahawks and the New England Patriots. We all have thoughts here. One thing I wanted to start this off with, though, is essentially the biggest story in the Super Bowl, is the career arc of Sam Darnold, who I think many people wrote off just a few short years ago. And as Nick Harvey is a Minnesota Vikings
Nick
fan,
has thoughts.
he is not very pleased having to sit here and talk about Sam Darnold playing in the big one while Minnesota misses the playoffs.
The fact that we started with this for this conversation.
It absolutely is. I know my audience. I know my teammates. It's a KYP episode, Know Your Personnel. So I had to start this off with From Cooked to Cooking, the Sam Darnold story. In this instance, with everything we've seen from Sam Darnold, most people before 2024 think of Sam Darnold, and the only lasting image they have is of him slowly pointing to the screen with a graphic behind him that says, out indefinitely, mononucleosis.
I'll never forget that.
The clip of him on the sideline against the Patriots saying, I'm seeing ghosts. Well, now he's potentially seeing more dollar signs and a Lombardi trophy because he is 4 quarters away from leading the Seattle Seahawks to winning a Super Bowl title. So my big question is, it's a pretty simple one. Do you trust Sam Darnold enough to win the Seahawks the Super Bowl, or do you still maybe think of him as what we saw early in his career when he was playing in the NFL's version of Siberia, essentially, with the New York Jets?
It's hard for me because as a Vikings fan, watching him in Minnesota, you saw this, like, it was the beginning of that transformative time in his career. He started to play really well. He clicked really well with that offense. He had the talent. He had the assets at wide receiver that, helped him, certainly. It definitely supplemented what he was able to do, but he was a good quarterback. He was making great passes, and then, you lose him to free agency because you don't want to pay the guy a couple extra $1 million after he took you on a generational run, one of the best you've been in a long time. He goes to Seattle, and he does the exact same thing. I through multiple points this season, have said, okay, this is where Sam Darnold could Sam Darnold. This is where it could all fall apart. And I think the biggest game for me was that Thursday night primetime against the Rams, where they came back and won, and it was an incredible Thursday night game. It was electric. It was so much fun to watch.
Game of the year.
And that's that game where I'm sitting there going, okay, if he wins this, I'll give it to him. He's legit. He's gotten over whatever happened in the early portion of his career. He's going to get it done, and he's going to be a long-time quarterback in this league, or a long-time starting quarterback in this league. And he did it again just a few short weeks ago against the Rams again. I mean, he's just delivered time and time again this season. When people say, oh, he's going to Sam Darnold at some point, I just hope it's not Sunday.
Well, and it's so nice to see someone rewrite their story
Agreed.
like that,
Yeah.
especially when you still have so much time to continue your career and have a good one and be like, hey, the first third of your career, first half, depends on how much longer he keeps going, that was rough. But then you switched it up and you kept going, and then he might have a Super Bowl ring to show for it. And the rough part, Nick, is the fact that the turning point will always be his tenure with the Minnesota Vikings. And that is something that your front office has to sit with for all of eternity. I do not wish that on you, but unfortunately, that is the bed you lie in. Anyways, I do think that Sam Darnold has what it takes, and it's not even just him. Seattle is really impressive on both sides of the ball. They really surprised me because I don't think going into this season anybody was really anticipating them being this good. Because I think that this is always a team that flies under the radar anyways. Like, not a lot of people, unless you're a Seattle Seahawks fan, a lot of people don't really think about the Seahawks, and they haven't thought about them in this way in a long time, and it didn't end up being all that great for them in the Super Bowl the last time. So it's cool to see all of this kind of pan out and see Sam Darnold, just doing his thing, and see this whole team experience this. Of course, we've got Nicky Manwari and Ernest Jones rolling in there and getting to experience this as well. And that leads us to Nicky Manwari. We think he got snubbed for Defensive Rookie of the Year, but that's a whole other conversation. But I don't know if we're doing picks yet, but I'm leaning Seattle in this whole thing.
Oh yeah, we'll certainly get to the picks, and I think if we're predicting something at the beginning of the year. I don't think any of us would have foreseen sitting here 2 days before the Super Bowl and the biggest story in Super Bowl week being the injury availability of Nick Emenwari.
Yeah.
Right? I don't think any of us would have foreseen that happening, but the way he's played in these playoffs have made it to where he might be considered the most important player for this Seahawks defense, which leads me right into my next question. On the Patriots side of things, what do you think that they need to do to be able to pull off the upset? And I think a lot of this does center around accounting for where number 3 is going to be at on the field, because he can be up on the line of scrimmage. He could be in the slot, guarding a slot receiver. Mike McDonald just moves him around so many different places, but you look at what the Patriots need to do on offense. What's the big thing they need to be able to do to be able to score enough points against the league's best scoring defense to stay in this thing?
That's a good question. I think I'm struggling with that one, because Seattle's defense time and time again has proved that they're arguably the best in the league. And the stats obviously back it up, but like if you watch them and you watch any other team that people are comparing and saying, oh, they've got a really good defense. Have you watched Seattle play? I mean, it's unbelievable. And you've got somebody as versatile as Nick Emenwari. I mean, this isn't new to South Carolina fans, right? We've
known this.
I think I expected maybe growing pains this year more than anything. Like, you see him jump into a role and you see him start to figure out the NFL. No, he did exactly what he was doing at South Carolina, and nothing has changed for him. He shows up there was one game this season he had, a blocked field goal, an interception, and a sack in the same game. Like, what? Who does that?
The perfect encapsulation.
Nick Emenwari does that. Yeah. I mean, it's hard because, and I'm not sitting here just trying to continue to harp on the Seahawks, but for the Patriots, yes, they have offensive talent. I mean, you got Drake May, who has proved to be, in my opinion, maybe the best quarterback in the league this year. He didn't win MVP, but he was, what a turnaround. And not to mention Mike Vrabel, who I think, and I've said this to you before, I know, like, I'd run through a brick wall for Mike Vrabel. I'm not a Patriots fan. I grew up, my mom's from Ohio. She grew up a Steelers fan. I naturally grew up a Steelers fan and did not like the Patriots, did not like Tom Brady. But, like, man, Mike Vrabel is a guy that it's hard not to like him.
Yeah.
Like, he wins his locker room everywhere he goes, and it's evident. And that, if it comes down to anything, it's going to be coaching decisions. Can Mike Vrabel outcoach Mike McDonald? I mean, it's the battle of the Mikes. Somebody's got to keep the name. So I don't know, but I think Seattle's defense proves to be such a big challenge this weekend.
That's the thing too, is I think this is just such a good matchup, because this is what you would want to see, is Seattle's defense going up against New England's offense.
Yeah.
And I will say, I do think Drake May got snubbed. It's an existential crisis for me, because I don't want to like this Patriots team. I don't think anybody wants to. But you look at somebody like Mike Vrabel, you look at Drake May, they're likable people, and they're putting out a great product. And it's almost like, is this part of the plan? Is this some sort of scheme to get everybody to like New England again, and then they start winning a bunch of Super Bowls? I don't know. I won't start the conspiracy theories. But it's been difficult because they're a great team to watch and they're so much fun. So this is the Super Bowl that I wanted. This is the matchup that I was looking for. And I think it's going to be, like you said, just a battle of wills or a battle of Mikes. Excuse me, wrong name.
Right.
But just truly who can have the smartest decisions and just who wants it more almost. They're both so good.
And before we get to our one final thing, where you guys will take anything from the sports world and give one final shout out, we have to do picks. So who wins this game and what's the final score?
I teed mine up already. I'm going Seattle Seahawks. I think I told you yesterday, 24-17. I think it's going to be a close game. I think within 3 to 7 points. But I think Seattle gets it done.
Sam Darnold's going to win a Super Bowl.
And it's going to hurt.
That's just like, that's if you want to know why that contemplation just happened.
You look like you're in pain.
That was
coming to this
hard
realization.
for me to say, because he's not going to win a Super Bowl with the Minnesota Vikings.
But J.G. McCarthy will? Okay, I'm sorry.
We don't have time for that today.
Yeah, no, I like Seattle. I think you're looking at like a 31-24, like another. It's a one possession, maybe two possession. Like at 31-21, I could see just as well. I mean, points are going to be hard to come by. It's going to be I think you'll see a defensive touchdown this weekend. I mean, I think it's possible that happens. Maybe you see some special teams action. I would love that. Just, like, I want chaos. I don't have a dog in the fight here. I don't really.
Same.
I'll be upset if New England wins just because of that long-standing history with the Patriots of times where I really didn't like them and still kind of don't. But at the same time, like, I don't really have a dog in the fight other than I'm pulling for Nick Emanwari and for Ernest Jones, and I want to see the Gamecocks do well. So I'm gonna go for the Seahawks, I think.
Well, if you're cheering for maximum chaos, cheer for a scenario where the Seahawks are down and have the ball at the 1 yard line with less than 30 seconds left, and just see what happens, right?
More flashbacks.
Can we get a full redemption circle, not just for Sam Darnold's career, but for the Seattle Seahawks franchise to try to rectify a previous wrong from over a decade ago? But before we wrap up here, I want to give both of you a chance to shout out anything in sports. If you were watching Around the Horn, where the winner would always get a couple of minutes, you guys are both winners, so you'll both get a couple of minutes. Anything in the world of sports. Julia, we'll start with you. One last thing.
So my one last thing is what you should be watching during the Winter Olympics, and I'm going to tell you it's curling. Nick and I, we went out to Charleston. We got to experience it for ourselves. We know how fun it is.
It's awesome.
Nick has already tuned in a little bit. He was locked into the mixed doubles. Curling was the first sport to kick off the Winter Olympics, and it's going to be great. The U.S. killing it already. Tune into curling because I think you'll find that it's something that maybe you don't understand, but you'll want to understand. There's 2 places in South Carolina that you can try it out yourselves. Unfortunately, it's not in Columbia. You got to go to Greenville or Charleston, but I'll tell you, it's worth it.
It's absolutely worth it, yeah. For me, not a lot of hockey fans across the state of South Carolina. I'm going to take this time to tell you about the New York Rangers and the dumpster fire of an organization that we have turned into. Me personally, I'm a New York Rangers fan. We just traded away our Timmy Panarin, who was the best free agent signing in the team's history. What did we get for him? A bag of half-eaten Doritos. That means a conditional 3rd-round pick and a prospect who hasn't played a regular season game in the NHL. I don't know what to tell you. The Rangers were Eastern Conference finalists 2 years ago, and they've missed the playoffs 2 years in a row and decided that they're not rebuilding but retooling. That's what they said. You heard that? I hope you did, because that's what it sounds like when the New York Rangers go on the ice. It sounds like a New York traffic street. It's awful, and I'm in a real bad space with the New York Rangers right now, and wow. It's really tough. It's a tough time to be a New York Rangers fan.
A season of car horn honking and obscenities.
Yeah. 9 shutouts. They've been shut out 9 times this season. 7 of those were on home ice at Madison Square Garden, the world's most famous arena.
Go for double digits, I guess.
As somebody who is a Nashville Predators fan, I've heard we're not rebuilding, we're retooling thing for about 6 years now, and I can't promise you that you're in for anything fun. I am afraid.
But this was fun.
But this was
a lot of fun.
This is the fun that I can promise and try to pull through with. Yeah. Thank you both, Nick Harvey, Julie Westerman from WIS, for the first ever Game TV crossover.
Honored.
We'll see you again here soon. We'll have them back in studio to bring you everything, their thoughts on South Carolina athletics and national sports topics. All of that and more. Just stay tuned here on the Game TV Radio on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. We're really close to a cool subscriber goal. That's just going to make me very happy if you do it. So just press subscribe. Do it for me. We'll see you again next time.